Apparently, Tories are being told to shave off beards.
Oh, because that's gonna make up for all the crimes, is it? What are they trying to play? Guess who?
How did your beard come about, Otto?
Just got a fat chin, really. I mean, not much of an origin story. It's really not much of an. I look at my son, who is 19, and like he's got a body like that, yeah. And I think, what the happened? You know, I could stuff burgers, beer, the whole lot. And then aged about 36. No, not even that. About 30. So I'm thinking, what is that thing that's protruding just beneath my my upper part of my body? And I realized that some miracle had happened, and I started putting on weight. And now, if I even look at a potato, I put on about 15 stone.
I understand. As soon as I hit 30, it was like metabolism just went. Plus, there was also the fact that I'm out raving every weekend. That probably has something to do.
Well, yes. I mean, if you're out dancing,
burning calories
until the early hours, I mean, you are burning calories. I often thought that's how I ended up keeping thin, just by dancing all the way until like 6 in the morning.
Which is fine, but at my age, if you go dancing, you need a defibrillator next.
Well, yeah, I can understand. I do dance now, though. I do like dancehall dance, and that's really hard dancing, like really hard.
What is it?
It's like Jamaican dancing, so it's basically like loads of like jumping down, like almost like burpee dancing. You know, burpees where you go down to the floor and up again, and like squatting, and it's intense. But you burn like about 500 calories in an hour doing it.
That's pretty good.
But it's just not having any impact. I'm like, God, I'm gonna have to do this every day for the rest of my life, and it's not doing anything. It's not helping.
See, I remember reading a study about people going to the gym, and they were like, okay, why are people going to the gym putting on weight and not losing weight? And the problem was the gifts people would give to themselves after. So they'd be like, I go to the gym and I do like 2 hours, and then okay, well, now I go into the cafe and have a chocolate muffin, because you know I worked out so much. It's a gift to myself. And then people would end up just sabotaging themselves. So I'm not saying it's in your case, but Nick, that seems to be generally what happens.
I mean, it's called little treat culture. Little treat, just give myself a little treat because I've done something hard. But I've been actually doing like fasting as well, like 16/8 fasting,
like Rishi Sunak.
Oh no, he's been doing like, what is it, 36
hours
of being awake.
Fella, he's tiny.
Yeah, but he's a little fella. I mean, you don't need as much food when you're that small.
No, someone just puts like a leaf through the cage, so he nibbles on it.
I did fail biology at school, though. I wouldn't take that as the as the truth. Yes.
Fake science.
I'm a bit of an expert. I coached football and basketball and did sports science, so I can answer some of these questions.
You're a proper expert.
Yeah. I was trying to be a football coach, a professional football coach. That was my big goal. But unfortunately, COVID got in the way, and I've not picked it up since. An illness.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but 80% of your ability to retain and gain and lose weight is down to diet.
Yes,
80-70%, depending on.
That's why I started doing the fasting. It's not that hard. All you got to do is you just eat in an 8-hour period window period. So if you don't eat until like 10, you can eat until 6, and then you have your last meal of the day at 6, and you just don't snack or anything. You don't eat anything after that. So
it depends entirely on each person. So Bayern Munich did a study about just before COVID, I think, where they got their players to eat a couple of hours afterwards just to see how they affected them. And apparently it was anywhere between an hour and 3 hours, and every single player was different. So some got the best amount of nutrition out of, fixing up the body with food an hour after, and some it would be more optimal to wait 3 hours. So we're really quite varied in that department. I found out a crazy stat. Apparently we're only 0.4% different genetically, which is actually minuscule. Yeah. Apparently chimpanzees are about 1.4. Which is why there's a theory that we bottlenecked to about 40 to 50 people. 40 to 100 people at some point in our history, because the genetic variation is so limited. We don't know why, though. Another mystery. We've got to get on. We've got to show them.
A science lesson. It was like one of those free science lessons. Well, it wasn't free. I'd have paid good money for that.
it says.
I mean, not good money because it was only like a minute or two, but I mean, okay money.
50p, like 50p.
I would have paid something. I would have paid something for it. Yeah.
You still can.
Oh dear! I've just left my wallet behind. Sorry.
How convenient. I swear I bought your book last time. I can't find it. I've actually ordered it.
That's what
I pre-ordered it. No, I remember because it has a section on Napoleon, and I was literally teaching the subject at the time, and I was like, okay, this is actually really interesting. I could bring it up with my students and mess with examiners.
I did it, yes. So that was the first one. I had a whole section. It was my favorite section in that book was about Napoleon's height. Everybody thought he was a little fella, but actually, yeah, he was tall. I think he was taller than Wellington. And he was like just above average height for the time, but propaganda, you see,
is that correct?
Something like that, 5'9". Yeah, it's the same with Hitler was taller than Churchill, but everybody portrayed Hitler as a jumped-up little corporal. It's very interesting how that happens. Heights in politics.
But Hitler got the Iron Cross. He definitely got it once, but did he get it 3 times? Twice.
Second class. Might have got it twice, but it was second. The Iron Cross, they dished out the Iron Cross, much like when I was a child in the 70s and 80s, they dished out those swimming badges. It's another misconception. Cool. They gave out tons of Iron Crosses. And I know this because I was researching that for my second book, and then I didn't actually use that material, so I parked it in my brain. I think they gave out, off the top of my head, they gave out like 1 million. Whereas, by contrast, like Victoria Crosses in the First World War, maybe 1,000 or so, military crosses, maybe 10 or 15,000, something like that. So the Iron Cross second class was dished out to a lot of people in the First World War.
So it was 1 million. So there was their total army for the First World War 20? No, it can't be 20 million. It's got to be like.
You see, this is the trouble. I now have to look it up, but it was a lot. There was a lot of second. The Iron Cross was a sort of graded medal. So if you got a second class, and then you did something else brave, they would give you a first class. So there were very few first class Iron Crosses given out, or like a few thousand. But the second class Iron Cross was given to a lot of people.
I reckon the German army was 2 to 3 million total, including dead and wounded. So that'd be 1 in 3 would get an Iron Cross. And it's got 2.
I'm just looking at
to Iron Cross chat.
Yeah.
With
5.5. I underestimated 5.5 million second Iron Cross second class.
So pretty much everyone got.
I got.
How big was the army?
I mean, the German, the Austrian.
Oh yeah.
There were a lot given out.
What is an Iron Cross? I don't know.
So it's a medal that you're awarded for an act of supreme bravery.
British.
Bravery.
No, German. Which is why Hitler got it. Because he's Austrian.
We didn't give. Although, fun fact, when the First World War broke out, the Kaiser, that's the head of the German leader, he was an admiral of the British fleet. I think he was a high admiral of the British fleet, and he was a field marshal in the British army. He had to, and the war's broken out, and they took time. They took time to deliver the uniforms back to the British embassy before everybody fled. Because Kaiser Wilhelm was the grandson of Queen Victoria. I mean, basically, World War I was a family argument that got horribly out of control.
We were talking about that a couple of weeks back when we had a special on the monarchy. And we were saying that it's a family affair that has basically caused World War I and II. Because a lot of historians, I don't know where you stand on this, Otto, or Andrew, is that World War I and II is just a break in the middle. It's like a half-time whistle and recoup. I think most historians agree on that. So that means that family, the British royal family, are directly involved in having killed millions and millions of people. That's
I would say that the Cold War also was part of that. I mean, there's a good case to argue that the war went on from 1914 to about 1989.
It's still going on.
And you could argue kind of it's still going on, yeah. But I think 89 is a good point. The reunification of Germany in 1990 or 91 or whatever it was, that's kind of the end point of the two world wars.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Sunday Roast. We have two wonderful guests with us once again. We have Otto and Supertan. Otto, can you tell us a bit about yourself before we begin?
Certainly. My name is not really Otto. My name is Andrew Scott, and I'm a journalist and author and annoying Twitter entity who changed his name because an Irish actor stole my identity.
Moriarty, right?
The hot
Bastard,
priest.
yeah.
The hot priest.
And Supertan, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah. I make very angry political videos about the government. I started doing it during lockdown. My real name is Tan Smith. It's not Superstankii. And it's got out of hand, to be honest with you. I started off with a few followers and it's just got wildly out of hand.
So, well, we'll go to Alex. Alex, can you tell us a bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the show?
Hi, I'm Alex, also known as Political X. I run a YouTube channel. I'm a historian, a journalist, and I do a little bit of sports coaching. Max, my wonderful co-host, can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Max. I run the Robespierre channel where I talk about British politics and Brexit in particular. Can we start on that? Brexit. The issue of Brexit is the 4th anniversary. Is that right, Alex?
That's right. It's 4 years on. So I'm going to throw it over to Tan and Andrew. Do you prefer Andrew or Otto?
Call me Andrew, I'm among friends.
Alex.
Aww. Aww. Okay, 4 years on, is Brexit a success? Andrew?
Well, I mean, about 2 days ago, as I was either getting up or going to bed, I can't remember anymore. I thought, oh, it's nearly upon us, the 4th anniversary. Shall I send out a tweet or a post, as it's now called, saying, can you name any Brexit, inviting hatred and ire? Yes, why not? I'll send that tweet out. So I sent the tweet out, and actually, people did come up with a couple of genuine Brexit benefits. Number one, the removal of our country from the European Union has exposed what an absolute catastrophe our democracy is. They can no longer blame Brussels for everything. They can no longer say it's all their fault. Oh, that was the EU. And likewise, they can no longer take claim and credit for all the good things that came out of the EU that people like David Cameron claimed they were all introducing. But things like same-sex marriage really came about as a result of our membership of the EU, and of course, aside to that, the ECHR, because you had to bring in some kind of equality on partnerships, which is why most European Union countries did it at the same time. So they can't pretend anymore that our membership of the European Union is to blame for every single thing. That's one benefit, I think, and I think it's a fairly solid one. The other one which people trotted out was, and it was quite amazing how many people said this, was how many people had got divorced.
Yeah.
I reckon, and this is not an exaggeration, the tweet went not hugely viral, but a lot of people commented. I reckon about 15 people told me they got divorced as a result of Brexit.
Really?
And that it was the final nail in the coffin of the relationship.
Yeah.
And it was all the people who were telling me this were women. They were all saying to me, that was it. I finally realized that I had to get out of this marriage and go and do something else. So clearly, these are sort of missed Brexit benefits, but the benefits that Boris Johnson trotted out, and I actually copied out his tweet earlier, but I think if I was to read it out, because he's got the full honcho on his Twitter account, it would take about 10 minutes. But it was Waffle and Paff, and there was nothing in it. I think the one Brexit benefit Boris Johnson managed to get out was that the vaccine rollout had been quicker as a result of Brexit, but that has been so thoroughly and fully debunked.
We have been able to authorise the supply of this vaccine using provisions under European law which exist until the 1st of January. So our speed or our progress has been totally dependent on the availability of data in our rolling review and the rigorous assessment and independent advice we have received. So I hope that clarifies the point about the European relationship.
The nerve of the man to even trot it out. I mean, he might as well trot out as saying that Brexit caused the Earth to be a sphere again, no longer flat.
There was one Brexit benefit that I also heard, and this was from Anne Whitcomb, who's an oracle on the subject. But yeah. She mentioned live exports. So she said now Britain has the opportunity to ban live exports. And I actually did a bit of research, and I reached out to the European Commission. I had to wait 2 days for a response, but I got a response from them over this. And I said, look, is it possible for a member of the EU to ban live exports? And they said yes. It's complicated, but you can do it as a member of the European Union. But then it brought up another question. Why didn't Anne Whitcomb bring this issue up? If she was concerned about live exports, she was a member of the European Parliament. Why didn't she bring it up when she was in the Parliament? Like, if this is something that's really important for you, why didn't you raise it on a daily basis? Say, we need to end this?
Absolutely. I had a long, you get into one of these annoying Twitter spats, and then somebody brings up something totally random. Some guy on Twitter has a list of 30 Brexit benefits. And I went through his list, and I think number 15 or 16 was the export of shark fins. A ban on shark fins being removed from sharks. Right? And of course, then you go down a bit of a rabbit hole, because obviously I know nothing about that subject. So I spent a few minutes to get down. And yes, it was true. Britain has put a ban on the export of shark fins from the country, but it appears that this industry, for what it was worth, about the price of a family saloon car. It was like it was a handful of thousands of pounds. And as you've just said, Max, and I said to this person, surely if you really cared about animal welfare and the protection of sharks, you'd have stayed in the European Union and brought in a Europe-wide ban where it would really have an impact. But of course,
exactly.
That's a bit too clever, isn't it? I was going to say on the divorces, Michael Gove's wife cited that was the reason why she divorced him, because of Brexit. Yeah. And then there's an amazing Channel 4 documentary where a guy explains to Jacob Rees-Mogg and Alistair Campbell about the reason he ended up having a divorce from his wife was...
I very naively voted to leave, and my wife casually asked me one evening what my voting decision was, and I put it into a very succinct situation. I told her what I did, and it was like lighting the blue touch paper and standing back. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone who felt so devastatingly betrayed, upset, let down. And we've got two daughters, 15 and 18 at the moment, and as far as I'm concerned, that was the end of a very successful marriage.
Do you regret the way you voted?
I regret it so much. It breaks my heart talking about it.
And Mog doesn't know what to say.
Jacob.
Well, the story you tell is incredibly sad and heart-rending for you.
It's an interesting thing because, Farage was on TV last night trying to extol all these benefits. I've never heard anyone say you've caused families to be broken up. That would be quite an interesting thing to see how he reacts.
By what? Sorry.
The facts that the divorce with Gove and everything else. Is there something you'd like to say?
I don't think that was the reason why Gove and his wife split up, was it?
She cited it in the papers.
Did she? But she was a Republican, was she?
I don't know. I don't know what they didn't go into too much specifics. She just cited Brexit. She didn't cite the specifics as to why Brexit.
She said about why. Yeah, that
makes you wonder. It's quite a stab in the back if you're going to get Gove and just throw him under the bus. I mean, these are all things that he's done himself.
But she's also defended him an awful amount too, and she's an arse herself, isn't she?
Apparently, I haven't read too much on her.
Can I ask? Did anyone see the interview with Andrea Leadsom on Sky News, where she was asked about about the benefits of Brexit, and then she was confronted with an issue with a florist, an English florist, who's trying to import flowers from abroad.
The fact of the matter remains that businesses have huge opportunities with other parts of the world, which are the direct benefit of us leaving the European Union.
With all due respect, it's not about it being a big news story. It's about the small businesses that it's going to impact. We're speaking to a florist later on who will not be able to afford the flowers coming from Holland because she can't afford the checks that are going to have to be done and the increase in flowers as a result.
And as I say, leaving the single market was always going to have implications.
But what would you say to her and those like her?
So what I would say, I mean, I've had many constituency cases over the years of people who've changed their trading arrangements with the European Union as a result of different frictions, whether it's postal costs changing, whether it's border controls and so on. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that businesses need to adapt to meet the changing environment. There are huge opportunities from the rest of the world. Well, I don't know her particular circumstances.
She can't afford the flowers and the extra increase that it's going to cost her to get the checks before she brings them over from the Netherlands.
So there are many parts of the United Kingdom that are flower growers themselves, and there are other parts of the world.
So she shouldn't buy from Europe, that's what you're saying.
I'm not saying that at all.
But you are.
I don't know her circumstances.
And won't be able to because of, it won't be able to sell them on because it'll become too expensive. And Andrea said, well, why don't you just source them in Britain? So this is a common response. It's like, okay, have you ever run a business, or do you honestly think that the business owners have not looked into this? They didn't. I was waiting for Andrea Leadsom to tell me that I need to look for it in Britain.
It's so dumb, isn't it? What they don't get is, that all these people who are also often frequently happen to be sort of war nostalgists and, Blitz spirit and Dunkirk spirit and all that kind of stuff. They don't seem to have ever realised that there was rationing in the UK in World War II, because we've been importing food since the Napoleonic era. So, I mean, the idea that you can suddenly cut off trade and start becoming self-sufficient in avocados or whatever, it is extraordinary. I think the only vegetable we've ever been fully self-sufficient in is potatoes.
Turnips.
Not
Interestingly,
turnips.
not oven fries, which are all come from the EU, which is why your oven fries are more expensive. This is when you know you've been writing about this shit for far too long. You know. This is stuff I never needed to know.
Yeah, oh man, it's just a mess, isn't it? My feed on Twitter has just been full of people just taking the mickey out of people not being able to define why they left. But what people aren't realising is what an industrial level, like many-tiered con this was, and who really benefited from it. I mean, there was Sam Bright. He used to be Byline, didn't he? I think is he Novara Media? Yeah. He dropped an article today about Crispin O'Day, who's always sniffing around whichever, pound shorting con is going to cost us and make him millions. He's donated 10k to Reform. It's come out that but then he's also donated thousands to Jacob Rees-Mogg. And a lot of his money comes from the fossil fuel industry, Crispin O'Day, and he profited from Russia invading Ukraine, and he's the one who cleaned up the day after we left the referendum result.
He's short of the pound. He's
a notorious hedge funder, and this is who it all really benefited, were disaster capitalists. I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg's dad wrote the book on this. Wrote the book on this. It's what people need to realize is that you should be playing the people that were played on this. Like, I used to call them thick, but then I realized just how deep it was and exactly who was behind it. And all the links with the media and the Tories and and how easy it is to con a population. And that's the thing that fascinates me the most about populism, is the psychological aspect of how, despite being insane and thick, they can con so many people. It's like a cult, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's also the BBC, I'm sorry to say, dropped the ball really on Brexit, because there was this idea that whenever they had a topic to talk about, they would have somebody in reserve. So they'd have a reserve guest they could bring on if they weren't able to bring on somebody to talk about the topic in particular. And who was that reserve guest? Farage. So Farage was always available They could call him up at any time. We need to talk about the NHS. Bring Farage on. He can talk about it. And of course, he had a platform then to spread the idea that, well, if we leave the European Union, this will resolve the problem of the NHS. The topic is, I don't know, trade. Well, if we leave the European Union, this will. So he was given a platform where he could provide this idea that leaving the European Union would resolve all problems. And there was very little pushback. Or if there was pushback, it was from some expert but somebody who was not famous, nobody with any sort of real following. And Farage was given pretty much an open goal for him. He could say what he wanted. The journalist wouldn't really push back, and the expert would push back, but it would be forgotten about because of his charisma and his charm, he was able to get around these problems.
Yeah, I mean, also his complete disregard for the truth.
Yeah.
If you completely disregard the truth and trot out any old rubbish to win an argument, now you make a very good point, Matt, that people do and did underestimate Farage because he has a certain charm. He genuinely we as individuals might not fall for it, but I know people who've met Farage and they say, I don't agree with his politics, but he was very charming over a pint of beer and things like that. This was one of the great massive errors that Remainers made, which was that they underestimated the likes of Farage, plus they underestimated the ability of people just to lie and blather. The whole thing about blue passports, which I'm sure most of us thought was totally nuts, that did matter to a certain segment of the population. People did think those things were very British and whatever. And however ridiculous it was, but that's an old battle. It's an old battle. The battle now is trying to point out to people that none of this has benefited anyone and that we need to look forward and where do we go next.
You need to learn lessons from it, though, because what Max was saying was that very intense in the sense that it created this false equivalence. So you'd have an expert that knew what he was talking about, and then you'd have Farage, and they would be kind of like played off as the same or equivalent. And that's the problem started, wasn't it?
Well, there is one person it benefited that hardly ever gets brought up. And I wound up Niall Gardner with this, but that's Putin. It weakened the EU. But I said, it's funny, isn't it, how after Brexit, it was immediately COVID. And as soon as all that was out of the way, he went straight into Ukraine. And I sort of go, we know he's interfered in our elections. We know our government won't look into it. We know our government, as you pointed out, Tan, is deeply connected to him, either through his oligarchs, who can only become an oligarch if he gives the okay, who have then funneled money into the UK political scene, or they've done it through business transactions like Infosys. They're still operating in there, and Rishi Sunak's his wife is getting money out of it, which is going on to their dinner table. It's putting food on the table for them. Obviously, they get money from elsewhere, but it's the principle. So you end up going, Putin's the one that, it makes me wonder, was Putin just waiting for Brexit to happen and then he went straight into the Ukraine while the EU was in disarray? Is that too much? It is what happened.
But it does predate that a little bit because he went into Crimea in 2014. But I think he depended on a disunited Europe, and he was expecting when he went into Ukraine again in 2022, he was expecting, okay, they're not going to respond to me. They didn't respond to me before. Europe is much more divided now post Brexit, and he was expecting to have everything done and dusted in 3 days, but we saw the result of that. So I think part of it is Brexit, but I think part of it is he was expecting the West or Europe and the US to be much more divided on this.
It would have been better for him to go immediately after Brexit instead of COVID. If COVID hadn't happened, it would have been a better opportunity because everyone got hit by COVID. Only Europe got hit by Brexit. So COVID, you could even argue, delayed it by 2 years because he was always going to go in and knock him out. Like he's not that type of him. And from what I've heard from CIA agents, they've said they work long term. They'll work 10, 20-year programs. I mean, the CIA work 10, 20-year programs. We know that for a fact. So it's always a long-term game. Putin's never thinking the short term, like, a lot of our governments, which only are going to last for 4 or 5 years. He's going, I'm in for life. What's the big project? How do I sever the West and start regaining power for Russia? And that's his whole thing. And see you nodding there, Otto.
So it's what their game is, not to pull Russia up, but to drag everyone else down, because they know they can't pull themselves up to that level. So a lot of it is about power, a lot of it is about money, a lot of it is about land, and a lot of it is about lost prestige. And that's very, very important. I mean, in a weird, distorted parallel, there's something quite similar between, I mean, Putin's version is at the extremis of ghastly evilness and corruption, but there is a similarity in that kind of exceptionalist spirit between the British and Brexit and Putin's Russia, which very few people ever point out. In both cases, you've got countries and elites with a very, very high opinion of their place in the world. And post-USSR, as Russia collapsed in on itself, and when Putin came along post Yeltsin, they knew they couldn't do it, but they did know they could divide the West, and they knew that because they had been doing it since the 1920s. In fact, disinformation is a Russian word. And the fun fact about the word disinformation is they picked that word because it sounded French. So even disinformation is disinformation. They could blame it on the French.
Sneaky Russian dogs.
And the special office of disinformation in the Kremlin was set up in the 1920s and has run ever since. Now, when people trot out conspiracy theories to me now, because I've written 2 books which feature it's amazing when you're writing fake history how often the office of disinformation pops up. For example, pandemics. A lot of people around the world still believe that the HIV virus somehow was concocted in an American lab, in Portland labs, and that at some point it was injected into a monkey which escaped, or something, or some stories to that end. Now we know, because in the immediate, this was called Operation Infection, and we know the Russians did it because in the immediate post-Cold War era, they admitted it. They owned up that they had concocted this entire plot called Operation Infection to make people think that the virus had escaped from an American lab. We know they did that, and they spread it through Indian and British newspapers. And the same thing with the Kennedy assassination. In the immediate wake of the Kennedy assassination, they started concocting a conspiracy theory in which Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy, he was completely innocent, and and people still believe that. In fact, if you watch the Oliver Stone film, people really buy it. And when I was promoting my book, I had a lot of people going, "Yeah, but there was a conspiracy, wasn't there?" No, there wasn't. Not if you really dig. If you really dig into the Kennedy story, and that will take you 1 hour, there was no conspiracy.
Oh, I could debate that. I'd happily debate that. I could say it might have been 2 individuals. It's the Warren report, isn't it? Which is the second committee meeting.
The Warren report. So the Warren report. Anyway, this will be a side angle. We can argue this another day, and I'd happily do that. But
I'm game. But are you game?
Whether you believe in it or not, what is a matter of fact, of historical fact, was the Russians and the Soviet Union took massive advantage in the immediate way, and planted stories about the assassination in British left-wing newspapers, which then seeped out. In the modern age, they don't need to fund all those; they just get Twitter accounts to do it.
I would totally say Harvey Oswald fired that gun. I haven't seen anything to countermand that. I'm sure of it. I would also say there are witnesses that I've seen on TV. We could debate whether or not they're real or they're Russian spies involved. Which I think is perfectly plausible in the United States.
Absolutely. People thought they saw things, and the thing is, the big bit of the Lee Harvey Oswald story that everybody always conveniently ignores is the guy was psychotic, bought the rifle, tried to shoot another general 6 months earlier, and also that he defected to the Soviet Union for 2 years.
And his handprints were on the gun up in the.
And his handprints were on the gun.
Yeah. So he's like.
And his wife said he shot him. I mean, and he then shot a police officer who
Yeah.
just approached him to ask him a question and killed him. So, I mean, it's possible other people were involved. I'm prepared to debate that. But the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald didn't shoot...
There's some
the
odd facts
president-
about Lee Harvey Oswald's movements immediately after and before, and even getting from that top floor downstairs, because there's a police
Like the
officer's
one where he
witness
went
statement going, "Oh, I saw him in here," and then you have to work out how long it took him to get down, and it's just doable, I think. But we're totally segueing from Brexit here. Sorry,
but we
let's
were
go back
talking. Well, we are talking about the U.S., so it'd be interesting to talk about the two presidents or potential presidents. Well, the two former and current president of the United States. What's the Supertam? What's your take on? Is Biden too old or is Trump too?
Why is Biden too old? How's that a question? He's old, like he's getting there, isn't he? Like I don't know really. I mean, it's just, as I was saying earlier on, it's just fascinating to me that people are believing this like nonsense that he's coming out with. Trump's just gone completely insane. He's actually saying that he's going to like run a dictatorship.
If you haven't heard about Project 2025, stop what you're doing and watch this. Project 2025 is a plan for Trump's second term that would transform America into a far-right Christian nationalist militarized state. You can read the nearly 1,000-page plan for yourself at project2025.org so you can know I am not exaggerating. 3 key facts. Number 1. A mass firing purge that Trump authorized before the 2020 election but never got to act on is at the center of Project 2025. Now, more than 2 million Americans across the country are part of the federal civilian workforce. Scientists at scientific agencies, doctors at the FDA, accountants at the IRS. We want experts doing jobs that require expertise. But more than 50,000 of them would be fired under this plan and replaced with MAGA loyalists who would use the power of these agencies to fundamentally change the nature of America without needing to involve Congress. Number 2. Project 2025 is a far-right Christian nationalist agenda. By page 5, they're already proclaiming pornography should be outlawed, the people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned, educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered sex offenders. This would be alarming enough if they were talking about actual pornography. But their definition spans anything that acknowledges the existence of LGBTQ people. They claim on page 451 that families comprised of a married mother, father, and their children are the foundation of a well-ordered nation and healthy society, thereby designating queer people, single parents, unmarried co-parents, and people who get abortions as inherently inferior and a threat to the state. On page 584, they call for the Department of Labor to explicitly give companies permission to discriminate against LGBTQ Americans. On page 450, they also declare that life begins at conception, and abortion is, quote, not healthcare. Accordingly, the FDA would ban abortion medications, as detailed on page 458. The administration would also seek to strip abortion services and contraception from health plans. See pages 483 and 585. Number 3. Project 2025 envisions a militarized police state where law enforcement is answerable only to the president. Maybe you live in a blue city or state and you think, I don't have to worry about my librarians being imprisoned? Guess again. Page 553 lays out how Trump's Justice Department will take over local law enforcement if they don't like how your own elected officials are running things. And they will prosecute district attorneys that they don't agree with. The plan also strips the FBI director of their independence, making them a lackey of the president. See page 549. And on page 104, the plan reduces the number of military generals, so power is more fully consolidated in the commander-in-chief. A central focus of the new police state would be Trump's goal of undertaking
the largest domestic deportation operation in American history.
Immigration enforcement is to be conducted like a war, with the military deployed within the U.S., and millions of immigrants rounded up and thrown into newly constructed mass holding camps. A powerful new border security and immigration agency would replace the Department of Homeland Security. See page 133. This would also mean that DHS's efforts to combat far-right domestic terrorists would stop altogether. One plan that is not in the public document but that members of the Project 2025 team reportedly disclosed to the Washington Post is to invoke the Insurrection Act to have the military suppress public protests against Trump. I'm just scratching the surface. The plan is loaded with actions ranging from changing labor rules to effectively end overtime pay, that's on page 592, to slaughtering wild horses, that's on page 528. You can do your own deep dive on their website, project2025.org.
And people go, yeah, it's like, what the, not just that, but he's starting to resemble my shed. Like, I mean, he looks actually like he's been painted brown. What's going on? He's been creosoted. There was an insurrection. Idiots died. He's being, what is it? How many crimes have been against him now? How many has he been charged with?
Sexual assault, tax fraud, and he's been impeached twice.
He could say anything. He could do anything, and that is so terrifying. Like, no matter which side of the political spectrum you're on, nobody should be beyond.
We need to. I've said before, we need to interview these people and ask them, tell us what Trump would have to do to lose your support. We just have to find out what.
They have asked people this stuff, and it's like nothing. Like these people, like.
Tell me about if Donald Trump does not win. What do you do?
I hope that I'm going to die.
Is there anything that could happen with him indictment-wise that would say, all right, maybe this disqualifies him for president?
Not for me. I'm with him to the finish.
All right, thank you so much.
He could stand on the front steps of the White House and commit murder, and I'm with him.
Explain that to me. That's amazing. I mean,
look, he's the only man we've ever had in my lifetime that stood for America as president. Now, I was a George Herbert Walker Bush man and all that, but they don't anybody compare to Donald Trump. He loves this country, and that's why I love him.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit because, and you're, I'm guessing, a couple of months older than me, but I'm going to say that, you know, looking back at some presidents like Eisenhower, like LBJ, like Gerald Ford, like, Reagan, Bush, who you mentioned,
yeah.
What about them didn't stand for America in the same way that Trump does?
You know, I think it's got to do with the times we're living in. America's being assaulted. Open borders, all the issues. We all know the issues. And nobody stood under the attack that Trump stood under. And look what he's done. He's hanging in there. He's for us. He loves this country. And I'm going to support him to the end. I hope he wins. We need him.
Last question for you, because then you got to go in. What would he have done differently than President Biden that would have made you think that he would have been a better president?
President Biden? Biden, to me, if he had not been a career politician, he might have been better, but he's lived in Washington all his life. I think we need term limits. I think we need to stop all these old people from running Washington, D.C. It's corrupt.
Well, the old people, I mean, Trump isn't, there's not a huge difference in age.
Yeah, I should rephrase that. The old people that's been in Washington all their life.
Even if he was they've asked him, even if he was in jail and he was having to run the country from prison, and they'll be like, well, yeah, and they don't care. These people are massively brainwashed. It's like Jonestown style cultism. It is another level. They had the opportunity to stop him from being able to do this again. They could have stopped it, and now there's a chance that we're going to end up with that insane man in control of the US. That's terrifying to me. The hypocrisy of him, he's cheated on one wife with another wife, then cheated on that wife with a porn star, and then he's paid her hush money, and then he's preaching about Bible studies. It's like, what the hell are you doing?
I know. Insane. It is insane. I mean, I was in America. I don't know if any of you have been to America recently. I was in America 2 years ago. I was actually researching my book. And I like to fall into conversation with people. So everywhere I went, I've tried to fall into conversation. In New York, they just about call a policeman if you try and have a conversation with someone in the street. But outside of New York, as I fled from the angry mob that I was trying to talk to, outside of New York, I was in New England and Boston and places like that. Yeah, I fell into quite a lot of conversations, and I was in like an alcohol shop. They've got, because they got like these separate alcohol shops because they'll drink
liquor store, isn't that what they call it?
Yeah. And I fed a conversation with this guy, and he started going on and on about gas prices, not, gas as in petrol, on and on and on and on and on. And that was all he was interested in. Well, the price of a tank of gas in the United States is so ridiculously, jaw-droppingly cheap. I mean, it's like, have I made a mistake? Is the machine broken? I put like $30 into some gas-guzzling flipping Jeep or whatever, and the car's full. What is going on here? So I said to this guy, do you realise what the cost of fuel is in like Europe and the UK? Cheaper, he was going to me. Cheaper, is it? I was like, no, it's like 3 times as much. And this guy couldn't get it. And everywhere I went, the same discussion came up. Eventually, the conversation would always get round to the price of a tank of gas. And then I watched a lot of TV in hotel rooms and whatever as I was going around. And you suddenly get it. We moan about things like GB News and stuff like that. They are on another level of bad information.
Voting is a privilege in this country, and you need to be legal, not like California where 3 million illegals voted.
Let's talk about that.
I'm glad I brought that up, Allison.
Me too, Paula. So where are you getting your information?
From the media. Where else would we
media?
get? Some of it was CNN, I believe.
CNN said that 3 million illegal people voted.
Well,
in
it was coming
California?
all across the media. All across. Well, CNN didn't do it, then they were being smart this time.
Do you think that 3 million illegal people voted?
I believe in California that there were illegals that voted.
How many?
I don't. To tell you the truth, nobody really knows that number.
But do you think 3 dozen or do you think 3 million?
I think there was a good amount because the president told people that they could vote, and it happened in Nashua. We caught some people that they went into Nashua and they said, the president said I can vote. I'm here illegally.
Did you hear President Obama say that illegal people could vote?
Yes, I did.
I
heard it
this morning, actually.
Yes, I did hear it.
Tell me, where?
On you can find it, Google it. You can find it on Facebook.
All right, hold on. I don't want to waste any more time, but anyway, I see where it came from, and it's Fox Business Network deceptively edited a clip of Barack Obama to argue that the president encouraged illegal immigrants to vote when in fact he had said nothing of the sort when you go back to the transcript. You, as you sit here today, think that millions of illegal people voted in this country. You believe that there was widespread voting abuse.
I think there was in some states.
In the millions of people?
California allows it.
They do not allow illegal. You mean voter fraud? California allows.
I believe there is voter fraud in this country. And
the stuff that we get about Trump and that we read is far more detailed, and it tells the story. They're getting like it's like splatter guns of information fed out through these terrible news channels which are not telling news.
Can I just interrupt for a second? Yeah, no, I was over there about 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, and something I noticed as well about the news channels is that they have very, very short segments. So they'll have like a 5-minute segment, and then they'll have 5 minutes of advertisements. But it seems that everything is concentrated into a very short segment. So people don't actually have time to understand what's actually happening in the news. So it becomes very opinionated instead.
And of course, they've got no equivalent of Ofcom, so they can, something like Talk TV in the United States would be like an intellectual leviathan on their, and I'm not kidding. That would be like a sort of huge upgrade on their information systems. So America is a victim of it's bad information, misinformation, disinformation, and the ability of candidates just to lie. And as coming back to the original point, the age of both of those candidates tells us that there is, and the power of both of those candidates tells us there is something fundamentally rotten in America. Because we used to laugh about the decrepit old Soviet leaders in the time of Brezhnev and all those people. This is on another level. As we were saying, as we were chatting last night on WhatsApp, when Reagan left office, he was younger than, but after 2 terms, he was younger than Biden was when he took office.
Yeah.
You know, these people are significantly older than anyone who's gone before. And I'm not being ageist, because we all love and respect older people, but where's the youth and the vitality and the vision in America or anywhere else, really? Where's the vision?
The genders, it's all men, isn't it? I mean, if you look at, what's his name, old mate who keeps having a kip on the podium, Mitch McConnell, isn't it?
Path to finishing the NDA this week has been good bipartisan cooperation and a string of
Wait a minute. Are you good, Mitch?
Okay, Mitch?
He's checking.
Anything else you want to say, or should we just go back to your office? Do you want to say anything else to the press?
Go back.
Go ahead, John.
I'll take it. Let's go back to you.
Go ahead, John.
Robert Kennedy Jr.
Wow.
Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yeah, just like
RFK.
time to go, mate.
Yeah.
Like malfunctioning, like he's having a software update. They're still reeling him out. He's just standing there, just like, you know, and
That
it's like,
guy.
what the hell? And these old men, these old kind of like Mr. Burns style caricatures are making about women's bodies, are they?
Yeah.
And have a right to, you know, abortions and stuff like that. I mean, it's odious. But yeah, I've seen a few clips of American news stations, and it is terrifying. It's hella dystopian. If you think it's, you know, bad here with things, at least we've just got GB News. This goes out like prime time, doesn't it, on their stations to like millions and millions of people. At least with GB News, there's only about 10 old men in a pub watching it on a Wednesday, but that's it.
But also Ofcom. You know, Ofcom might be toothless, but even a toothless man can bite. You know, so they have nothing like that. Yeah. So I meant to say toothless dog, but it came out as man. I think it was the Biden effect.
Mitch McConnell, he does try to fight occasionally, apparently. That's another problem that America's got in the long list of things.
I mean,
what, Joe Biden going around biting people?
Biting people.
He's
they say,
known for it.
The real was it with journalism? It's man bites dog is the real story. So
yeah.
Well, just on there was some interesting facts that you brought up. I mean, I don't know if you heard this, but there was an announcement in the United States that the top 20 Christian websites, 19 of them are Russian troll farms, have now been shut down. And it's interesting you're bringing up how the religious seem to be, and the evangelicals seem to be happy with Trump over Biden. And you're going, well, why is that? And then you're going, well, the top 19 out of 20 Christian websites have been declared Russian troll farms. So you're going, that's just one aspect, but there's no reason why they should be voting for Trump. He doesn't actually have any Christian values whatsoever. He's a complete psychopath.
But they don't care about that because it's about delivering power. It's for them. It's not about religious. It's about power. So he's put our people into the Supreme Court. They've overruled Roe versus Wade. This is their this was their goal all along. And Trump and others and the Republican Party are a vehicle. They're happy to ignore. It's like with Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jacob Rees-Mogg makes money, has investments in companies that produce abortion pills. When he was confronted with that, he was like, well, that's a different thing. He's able to separate himself from that. It's ridiculous behavior.
It's true.
But there's an interesting thing about just you said about Russian is if you look at Putin has been very critical of wokeness and transgenderism and stuff like this. And it's interesting how the Republicans are repeating a lot of his things. And also that I've been following a few Ukrainian YouTube, Ukrainian Twitter accounts, and they post up a lot about how the Russian propaganda are happy to promote people like Tucker Carlson in the US.
Why is it worse to ask about it than it is to do it?
Because people are dying
on the front lines. You think it's a joke?
Why do I care? Why do I care what's going on in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia? And I'm serious. Like, why do I care?
Tell you why.
And why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am?
Because tell you why.
And why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am?
Because he's repeating the same languages they're using. So it's I'm not sure if it's Tucker Carlson is getting his talking points from the Russians, or the Russians are getting their talking points from him. But they're on the same page when it comes to issues like gender rights and abortion and religion and stuff like that.
Nigel Farage on RTV, television.
Yeah, they trotted out until RT got, until it became, RT trotted out all sorts of Brexit-minded people. Galloway had a show, didn't he, on Sputnik, which was an offshoot of George Galloway, which was an offshoot of RT. And that was an argument I used to have 5 or 6 years ago on Twitter, because I've spent a lot of time reading about Russian disinformation over the years and write about it. I would say people should not go on RT, and it should not be on Freeview. No, they were blasting. They were through the Freeview channel. They were blasting Russian propaganda into people in the UK. And it was only when Russia actually invaded Ukraine they went, "Oh dear, that's a problem, isn't it?" Because there's a channel spouting disinformation right into John in, Staines' living room, and he's fallen for it. And you hear these people trotting out all the sort of talking points of Russian propaganda. Still, I remember with the Skripal poisonings, the endless arguments I had online with people who completely believe. I mean, it's the same old trick, because the Russians, a bit like Boris Johnson, have very limited imaginations. They do the same thing over and over again. They will get the lab leak story out. They will do the same crap because they know it works.
Well, Boris was defending keeping RT on the air in Parliament, and you go and of course, I mean, there was the whole thing as well of him going to that bunga bunga party, which we now know is slang for a sex party in Italy, run by the KGB, and we know it was run by the KGB because the Italian Secret Service informed Italian politicians that came on television to tell us, translated from Italian into English, but tell us that these are KGB parties.
Party that Johnson attended in Umbria, supposedly sex parties. Sex parties hosted in this mansion, which are the bread and butter of KGB espionage services. And interestingly, the Dispatches misses out what was said in the report, which describes the parties as X-rated, and that it was concerning because the parties were anything goes atmosphere, which might create an environment where others could capture sex compromat.
And Boris has gone.
Well, yeah, but that's Lebedev Senior.
Oh, sorry.
It was Lebedev's dad, wasn't it? They say ex-KGB agent, but there's no such thing as an ex.
You're never ex. Go on, Otto.
No, you're only when you're dead, then you're ex.
Alexander Lebedev was the KGB agent in London head of the bureau in London in the 1980s. His son grew up here, and they were allowed to buy all these newspapers and stuff. And I suppose, again, in the immediate sort of wake of the end of the Cold War, people kind of went, "Oh, that's all right. That's quite an amusing story. The former head of the KGB has bought the Evening Standard." I used to read the Evening Standard a lot because I used to commute into London. And over the years, I saw it become a sort of vanity project of Evgeny Lebedev. But then, more worryingly, these sort of Russian figures who would pop up and be promoted. And the fact that they made him a lord, if you were to have written this as a sort of book 20 years ago, people would have thought it was a balmy farce. You'd have had Peter Cook playing Boris Johnson or something like that. That Britain has descended into sort of carry on up the United Kingdom, with a hefty dose of farce, where they've just turned up the volume too high.
But then that's the same thing with both Biden and Trump being president. They're literally. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Nikki Haley, because the one thing that is seemingly sticking to Trump is going senile, and it's really like. Yeah. Did you see how the Biden group edited Nikki Haley criticizing Trump about being senile, split it all together, and then at the very end went, President Biden endorses this video. It's like an advertising campaign vid, which you only can do, which you're meant to do for every video that promotes you running for president. I endorse this video. And it's like, wow. And basically, Nikki Haley had to point out to her audience that talking about Nancy Pelosi and Nikki Haley, his running rival, and quite clearly confusing the two.
Last night, Trump is at a rally.
You know, Nikki Haley,
and he's going on and on mentioning me multiple times as to why I didn't handle January 6th better.
By the way, they never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her 10,000 people. They don't want to talk about that.
I wasn't in office then. They're saying he got confused.
You have voter ID to buy a loaf of bread. You have ID to buy a loaf of bread. I'm driving over a road where it's almost all paper. And, you know, you can see paper. I know paper. I know cans. But all the time now we see whales washing up on shore because of the wind. Our veterans don't have cell phones, do they?
He got confused.
You know, did you know they destroyed all of the information, all of the evidence, everything? Deleted and destroyed all of it. All of it. Because of lots of things like Nikki Haley.
And you're seeing Donald Trump increasingly get confused on the campaign trail. He thought Nikki Haley was Nancy Pelosi. That clip is brutal.
So he confused one of the leading heads of Congress, who's a Democrat, with someone who wasn't there, who was working for him. Nikki Haley worked as the UN representative. So he knows who she is, and he's confused the two. And that's one of he's leading in the polls, but it's slipping, by the way, because of these senile comments. I think he's mixed up Obama with Biden 7 times so far.
Yeah. So he keeps saying he defeated Obama, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you know, preposterous. But this is the guy who claimed that during the American War of Independence, one of the reasons that the Patriots won was that they managed to seize the airport.
In June of 1775, the Continental Congress created a unified army out of the revolutionary forces encamped around Boston and New York, and named after the great George Washington, Commander-in-Chief. The Continental Army suffered a bitter winter of Valley Forge, found glory across the waters of the Delaware, and seized victory from Cornwallis of Yorktown. Our army manned the airport. It ran the ramparts. It took over the airports. It did everything it had to do.
Wow.
From a certain point of view.
In 1776, yeah? That was a gaffe which he made whilst he was president. He said, I think it was on Independence Day, you know, on this glorious day, we remember how they seized the airfields, you know, in 1776.
But what do his supporters say in response to that?
I suppose they just miss it. It just goes over their heads, you know.
Don't believe it.
And a lot of them, and I know this from talking to American friends, a lot of Americans view Trump as the guy who was the greatest businessman in the world because of The Apprentice. You know, The Apprentice on both sides of the channel. I'm turning into flipping Trump. The Apprentice on both sides of the Atlantic.
I think about you, Otto.
My age, yeah. The Apprentice has got a fuck of a lot to answer for, to be honest, because, you know, everything from Katie Hopkins to every sort of smooth-talking GB News host to President Trump, who a lot of Americans don't understand reality TV. They thought he genuinely was this kind of, hey, you know, you're fired, let's get on with it, person. And that image management of Trump is really what propelled him to the White House. And I suspect that we've had our TV reality president, and in a few years' time, we will have a TikTok president or prime minister town. There you go. That's a job for you.
Oh, Christ, no way. No way.
I don't know if you've heard of Mr. Beast. He's a philanthropist who works on YouTube, who has finally cracked the code in how to do charity work on huge scale and make the money for it through doing videos. So he'll do a video on, it'll be something really simple to something really complex. So the thing that most people know him for these days is the Squid Game, which he reenacted. But before that, it could be something as simple as like whatever you fit into the circle, you get to take home. And he would make sure it would be a homeless shelter that was going there, or someone who didn't have any money, or he set up a bank where you came in and whatever amount of money you asked for, you got.
Okay.
What do you guys want for Christmas?
Stick figure? $1,000. That would be nice.
Yes! What do you want for Christmas?
Art stuff.
Art stuff. And how much does that cost?
$1,000.
Here's $1,000.
Yay!
Congratulations.
Which is just insane. Or you turn up at a burger joint that he set up called Beast Burgers, and he'd be like, whatever you want, we'll give. So people would order food, and then he'd throw in a PlayStation, or he'd throw in a couple of grand, or yeah, it's like it's on another level. He has said he wants to run for president when in 2045. I think he's got actually a very good chance of winning it. Interestingly, he's in North Carolina, which is a swing state, so he actually has a chance of that. But he actually seems like he's got a good heart. Go ahead, Max.
For which party?
If I was to be a betting person, either he'd go independent or he'd go Democrat. It'd be one of the two.
Because if he's an independent, he doesn't have a hope. But
this is
I don't know. He gets more views than the Super Bowl on a weekly basis.
Wow.
That's
Really?
massive.
I mean, that is peak populism. I mean, it's someone that doesn't know what the hell they're doing. People say to me all the time, "Oh, you should be prime minister." I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. There's enough dickheads that don't know what they're doing in government. You don't need another one. You don't need another one. So yeah, it's kind of very worrying. Even if he is good, it's still worrying, isn't it?
But the thing is, how do you become a professional politician? You just become one by doing it. This is what people go, oh, there's some kind of magical division between the ordinary. I've met a lot of MPs over the years, partly because my parents work for the Conservative Party, but you would meet very well-intentioned people from both sides. I've met Labour and Conservative, and obviously in recent years I've met others. You would meet people who would think, yeah, these people... It's one of the things that annoys me about politics, actually, because you think everybody goes, oh, they're all the same. And quite a few of the politicians I've met over the years genuinely wanted to kind of improve things. It's this recent, even if you don't agree with what they wanted to do, they still kind of thought they had some sort of model for it. This recent rash in Carry On Up the United Kingdom of politicians and MPs, the Lee Andersons and these cartoonish kind of buffoons and lunatics. There used to be one or two, but when you look at the Conservative benches now, that's all there is. They are just sort of nutters.
You'd vote for the lamp, though, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, all hail the lamp.
All hail the lamp.
You've got to do the nod. Yeah, of course I would. No, you're right. You're right. I just think it'd be good if people actually had a bit of knowledge of politics and how it works, and that would be helpful. But then again, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's my mantra as I've been going around promoting my books. They teach maths in school up to a certain level. They teach English in school up to a certain level. You would think that something as important as understanding the country you live in, the democratic system you live in, how voting works, how first past the post works, how prime ministers become prime ministers, how the whole thing fits together, you would think that would be as important as those two other subjects, but it's not. There are sort of some nods towards citizenship classes, but I would say if I was prime minister for a day, compulsory GCSE on citizenship, so that people, just as you can count or multiply to 50, whatever, or do subdivision and all those things, people would roughly understand it. And if the population was educated to a relatively good degree on those basic things, this country would undergo a revolution within a generation. So it will never happen.
That's why they don't.
But I think it is heading. I mean, you could argue that it would be as simple as the lesson would be: you get to vote for a local MP, so you get to put a cross in a box every 5 years. And if you want to do anything else, you've got to bribe your local MP, or you've got to bribe their party with huge amounts of cash. And that's it. That's our politics system. There's nothing else. Maybe some sexual favors have to be done. That's about it. Like, I can't see anything else in terms of.
That's your lesson plan set up for lesson. That's your lesson plan set up for. That's your first lesson plan set up for lesson 1.
Dude, don't do that in schools. Don't. Will be struck off.
But I mean, there's nothing else to it. It's money and favors. That's it. There's like each of us get to put a cross on a box every 4 to 5 years, depending on the prime minister and when they decide. That's it. That's all. And you might want to go and meet your local MP to discuss a problem. It's up to them. They don't have to meet you. They can just go, no, I'm not having a surgery this week, or I'm never having a surgery at all ever. And you come up with this horrible conundrum where you end up, especially because it's first past the post, whoever wins, whoever gets the most votes wins. So then you just go, right, well, I'll just vote based on the party. Most people don't read the manifesto, so they don't know what they're actually voting for. They just go on what they've heard on TV, and they might be little sound bites that don't really reflect the truth. I mean, we've been having this whole debate for weeks about the Labour Party and them telling the truth or not about what they really want to do with Brexit and rejoining the EU. And that's been going on. And everyone's going, it's looking likely now they're not going to rejoin in the next 5 years, and it'll be at the next general election that they'll bring it up if they think the population's moved on. But we already know the population's moved on, because 60% want to rejoin, 85% of under 25-year-olds want to go back in. It's a dog.
But as you say, the trouble is, under first past the post, you've got to bring that middle ground. This is where I hate to bring up the Corbyn word, but this is where the Corbyn thing went so spectacularly wrong. I'm not a huge fan of Starmer, but I understand what they're doing. They are not providing any ammunition for the overwhelmingly right-wing press and media in this country to go after them. And they are playing their cards very close to their chest, because when your enemy is cutting its own side's heads off, you don't interrupt them. So that's what they're doing. I strongly suspect that once the curtain is pulled back, there are some sensible people in the Conservative Labour Party, that was a Freudian slip, at all levels. And there are some sensible people in the Labour Party at all levels, and I suspect some kind of after EEA relationship will be established with the EU. I would not be surprised if Starmer didn't say he's come up with a bespoke deal, which is essentially membership of EFTA or the EEA under another guise, and that they do that, or some kind of means of that. And I also hope they start enacting some kind of Lords reform, and hopefully that will lead to some change. But most people, returning to the initial point, simply don't understand first past the post.
Yeah.
They don't get it. And my teenage son, who can now vote, he's 19, was going to me recently, I might vote Green or something like that. I mean, he is now living in Brighton, so actually voting Green in Brighton might be quite a sensible thing. But if back in London here, he might as well just not go to the, might not as well not go to the polls.
Tan?
I live in, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, Tan, what do you know about tactical voting?
Oh, a little bit. We've got the campaign, the Stop the Tories.vote campaign, which is, oh my God. What's happened to my screen?
You're still on. We can still see you.
Falling over.
And the cat's got it.
Oh my God. Sit down. So, give me a sec.
I hate to say it, we've got to go.
Tonight's special guest star, Lorne Green. Tonight's episode, The Broken Promise.
Frank.
Stop the Tories.vote. Tactical campaign. We had enormous successes in the locals, over 1,000 seats. Were lost. Well, I don't know if it was all down to us, but we had over, 500,000 hits on the website in the 4 days leading up to the locals. And we're going to come at it bigger and harder in the general, because it's easier to predict in the generals than it is. I think it was one of the first time someone successfully tried to predict locals because they're so fiddly. Sorry, I'm just like flustered. I've just had like everything knocked off the side. But yeah, it's so you stick your postcode in, stopthetories.vote, and we'll tell you who to vote for in order to get out a Tory in your constituency, or as we put it, make them cry in a sports centre at 3 a.m. on election night. So
Otto, Tan, thank you so much.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
everyone.